I'm very pleased to be here and honored, and thanks the organizers. And this is not just to say things, but also to take home. This is a great learning event. Already we had excellent presentations, and we took the stage on growth, inequality, poverty, and Renata mentioned on the interplay between employment, family, happiness, and all these things. And on the basis of that, which is happily surprising, the richness of what we heard, I changed my presentation. And I will continue in the second part, so to speak, what I was originally planning to talk, which was what do we know of coming to 2010, to the Arab Spring, and how can we use this for the future? Because the world is not static. So we can measure poverty for ages, and what we know is that in all societies there are too few rich people and too many poor. Let's take it for a fact. Whether it's 10% or 20% does not make much difference. Also, what we know is the dynamics of society, of economy, of production and reproduction. So let's look a little bit forward. And here we have a case that we all know, that women to get into executive boards or even to work, they have to compromise a family and work. And you can see in this cartoon here that yes, the woman made it to the top, but she's still a mother. Now the question to you is, can this go forever? If the relationship at work has changed, can the family be the same? And the answer comes from the region. I mean, in the Arab region, we had the fertility rate of 7-8 children only 30 years ago. Now it's down to 3. And even the most surprising cases like Iran had the most successful family planning program from 1986 to 1996, where they reduced poverty and fertility by half. And in fact, I'm told in Tehran, the fertility rate is about 1.5. So we see a phenomenal transformation in the fertility. And if family is not about fertility, then I think we can change the subject. So I have a few slides from a presentation. I accidentally did that last Thursday, in another place. Doesn't have to know why. And the issue here is to link family with production and reproduction. This is the core function of any society. If you do not produce, if you do not have something to live upon in your environment and physically, like the animals, I mean, they produce. The lions have to eat the zebras. The zebras have to eat the grass. This is production. Okay, it's not monetized, but even the human species 10,000 years ago was like that. So you have to produce. And, of course, if you don't reproduce, you die as a society. So these are two essential functions in society. Now, can we treat them kind of independently? Well, we could, but they are linked through the economy and households, I mean here, family. How are they two linked? Through work. And all of them, of course, are subject to government regulations or to tradition. What we heard before from Mr. Darwish and the panel, it is us and them. These are the norms. These are the governments. So all of them come together as institutions. Now the question is, if we live in an economically globalized economy where everything changes, would household structure be the same? Would we have the same government regulations, the same government laws? Will the government try, or the society, to preserve these institutional arrangements, or they will adapt to them? And this part, the add-on, given that I heard the discussion, points that there are, in this system, if you change one, economy, the families will change, the laws will change. If you change the laws, you can change the family or the economy. The three things are integrated. You cannot talk about one without the other. I mean, take female education. I mean, look where female education was relatively to men in the region in the 1960s. For every 100 boys, there were 40 girls. Now you come, in tertiary education, there are more girls than boys. So Arab women are, we can say, more educated than men, Arab men. So when we come to family formation, the question is, will these women marry down Will a woman with a degree or having a doctorate marry to a man who is not equally educated? Perhaps she would. But that's a question I think that has to be posed. Can we deal with women marrying down? In fact, what we know is that men do not marry down. That is, if you see, they call it assortative mating. A man now with a degree wants to marry a woman with a degree in the West. And I think everywhere. That's the other thing, the underperformance of boys. You are all familiar with TIMSS, PEARLS, and all these internationally standardized tests. And I think Javad has done excellent work. I had a slide here from you, but I omitted it because you are here. You can talk about it. Look, the underperformance of boys relatively to girls. So not only fewer boys are in education, but those who are do not score as high, even in science and mathematics. So men, I think it's good if you were born early and you are old today. You didn't have to compete with these women today. This is another thing. Look, I mean, what happened here to the culture of having many children or the family? The fastest declines in fertility have been achieved in the Muslim countries, in Iran, in Bangladesh, and Morocco. It took the United States 100 years to have fertility from 6 to 3. It took Iran 10, Bangladesh 15, Morocco 20. These are changes within one generation. There are phenomenal changes in the sphere of reproduction. Now, can we assume this does not affect the economy, or that they are not affected by the economy and women's education? Well, look at this. This is the increase in female labor force participation in the last 20 years, since the reforms in the MENA region. Look what happened there. I mean, with the UAE, leading the pack, and other countries have on average 40, 50, 60% increase in female education, female work over time. So, if women now work and they are more educated, will they have the same family, the same fertility patterns as we had kind of 30, 40 years ago? Won't government policy change? Does norms, culture, whatever need to amend? I think that's a forward-looking way of coming to the 2014 Convention of the UN. So things have changed over time. Now, there is a sticky issue here. How far can you go with culture and norms and how binding they are? Let me give you an example from Britain. Up until 1945, a woman who was employed in the government and got married had to resign, had to leave the government. That was not religion, it was not norm, it was a law. The government said you cannot be a mother and work. This is not the Victorian values. That's 1945. It's not 19th century or 100 years ago. How things have changed over time, let me give you a graphic thing. Look what wives were for in the US, only the previous generation. A woman had to be a wife. Do you think Kenwood or any other firm will put an advertisement that goes against culture, against the beliefs? So there you are a family, you have to buy a Kenwood. In fact, it was legitimate to spank your wife. This is another advertisement. Why? If she didn't do the right coffee, if she didn't cook properly. Not only that, you could even kill your wife. These are real advertisements, by the way, right? I didn't create them myself. So just a generation ago, you can see that the culture, if you want, of the West was not different than in my country, Greece, or in this part of the world. A woman had to be a wife, had to be soft, and could be spanked or even killed. Now, it's not just things change. Language change to accommodate. If you read old articles, scientific articles, in 1910, in 1920, you will see articles on bastardy. Bastard was a legitimate term. Very bad word, but it was there. Why? To discourage women and families or couples to have children out of wedlock. Then this became illegitimate births, up until 1984, I think. At that time, somebody said in Britain, guys, 40% of us are illegitimate, right? So they changed it, and they made it births out of wedlock. And now I think we use the term non-marital fertility. which is totally neutral, right? You have children who are born with marriage and children which are born without marriage. Now the numbers below, perhaps you cannot see, you cannot appreciate unless you see it in the graph, which I have done. Look at this. Britain up until 1960 had the same rate of bastardy or illegitimate children, the same structure of family and reproduction as it had in the 19th century, which means forever. Now look how quickly things changed. And today, 40% of children are from part of non-marital fertility. This was accommodated in language, in laws, in single parenthood, and whatever. So the culture in Britain was then, up until 1960, the same as it was in the rest of the world. And things changed. Now, something that comes with that is the age of first childbirth in OECD countries, these are the rich countries, which has gone up from 24 years to 28. That's a big change because girls can marry at 10 or 12 and can have a child anytime between 10 and whatever. Now we're halfway through the fertility cycle of women, 28 years, and there are not that many after that to have a child. But what is extremely interesting, this is the share of marriage of births outside wedlock against the total fertility rate. And as you increase the availability, if you want, or the willingness of women to have a child without being married, fertility increases. What you have in the top end is Sweden, Norway, France, Denmark, Finland, USA. And what you have at the bottom is Greece, Italy, which are very Christian, very practicing Christian, if you want, countries. So somehow fertility now is much higher when women can choose to have a child without first having to choose a husband. That's a fact. I'm not saying it is the world I would like to see, but that's the way things have gone over time. Why they have gone like that? Well, in the 50s and 60s, female education in the West increased, women started working, and it was all the concomitant changes that came with that. We should also take care that this out-of-wedlock fertility differs between families of different income, different education, and also age. I picked up here the age. So, girls who have a child out of wedlock, 90% who have a child, 90% of them are just single mothers. When you go to women who marry late, then women in that age group, when you are 30, 35, your brain is a little bit more stable, perhaps, or you know what you want. So you see how complex the whole issue of family is. Depends on income, depends on age, depends on education. The fact is that it changes over time. So I think from what I heard somehow, the UN is going, to come up with a resolution which encompasses all the members, and of course 14 of those members already have provision for gay marriages, so the document has to be a compromise, I think. Otherwise there will be strong objection. There would not be a consensus document. So one way to go about it is, yes, we want to promote well-being while maintaining the integrity of our traditional ties. But these ties are changing. The traditional ties are here, local, while the world is changing and we are part of a globalizing world. So the challenge, I think, for any resolution of government policy is how we can accommodate what change we want in a way that will enable a smooth transition from one societal and economic equilibrium to another. So the punchline, I think, comes from Giuseppe's only book that he produced, and only phrase that he's known, and I think it's very powerful. If you want things to stay what they are, things will have to change. Things are already happening. If you want to, for example, to keep women or family, whatever it is, stop being globalized. Stop encouraging women to work. Stop educating women. So that was the thing from the discussion we had so far that I would like to show you. Now, in the other presentation, if I can find how to do it. Yes, I did. It's a presentation Okay. 5 more minutes. Okay. That was the long presentation. That was the short. What this presentation says is, when you do economic reforms, and I start from the economic reforms in the region in the 1990s, because then the social contract, the price of oil had come to an end, and there was a crisis in the region. There was fiscal instability, no longer public sector employment would increase, poverty was increasing, social services were under pressure. So we had all these reforms, partly with the IMF support and the IMF, but they did all the right things economically. Right? Liberalization, deregulation, privatization, consolidation, and all these kind of things. The next 2 decades until the Arab Spring were called the Arab Renaissance. In the sense the region came out of the lost decade of the 1980s and the stagnation it has had for many years and produced what the economists want to see. Lower debt, lower deficit, lower inflation, reduction in public spending. This is what economists look at, but it's not what the people were looking at, which is poverty, inequality, which was covered somehow, and more importantly, exclusion, and more importantly, voice and accountability of governments. So the economy and the institutions were moving in different ways, and this is part of the point I'm trying to make. Okay, what this says is that there is great diversity in the Arab world, so we should not, I'm talking regionally here, but we should be aware that we have Yemen and Qatar there, we have Tunisia and we have Iraq, okay? But nevertheless, Masoud referred to some myths, and I will go through my myths rather quickly. It was said the Arab Spring was because the growth was jobless and unemployment was high. I agree, unemployment was high, but the region created more jobs than any other region in the world. In fact, something that was missed was that unemployment was declining these years. It was high, but you don't go by the high, you go by the trend. They were doing better in this respect. Another myth is, oh, we have too many people. Well, already we know that fertility has been declining over time. And in fact, the peak of population boom in the region was already there in 2000. So we didn't have too many people to create unemployment. It's very easy to attribute the cause to population, fertility, and women. No, it was economic policies, as if I have time I will explain. Too many youth, this is the biggest myth. Look how the ratio of youth to adults, they are both competing in the labor market, changed since the 1970s in North Africa and the 1980s in the Middle East. So the ratio of youth was smaller. The problem was becoming the adults. And unemployment did not decline. It declined practically in the whole Arab region except in Algeria, Jordan, and Morocco. So you can see somehow all the reasons we've heard about the Arab Spring are not here, the quantitative reasons. Now, too many unemployed youth. This shows the ratio of unemployed youth to unemployed adults. The unemployed youth were declining. It became a problem of the adults. So my dictum here is stop complaining about the youth and education. The problem is the system, the economic reforms did not benefit the majority of the Arab people who were the adults. Right, okay, the youth unemployment rate by gender. There are too many youth, too much unemployment, the last thing on unemployment. If you see here, this is the Arab states unemployment, and this is North Africa, and this is the GCC for men. They are lower than other regions. What makes this graph different is that while the greens, which represent other regions, the black dot here, the black dot is female unemployment, is equal to male unemployment. Now look at all the other countries, and all the unemployment is women. So we've reached a stage where women come to the labor market, they are more educated, and push the unemployment rates high, so youth unemployment is high, and we say the region has high unemployment rates. No, the region has high female unemployment rates. Now link this to fertility, to family and everything. You see the change here. Okay, I will not go through the economy, which was all the problems that you had, only in what kind of economic gains we created. Just give me 2 more minutes here. The economic model after the 1990s, look what kind of productivity gains it created. The red shows how much more productive workers become in their current job. And you can see it's very small for men, is on the right. Now look at the blue. The blue is how much productivity increases because workers move from one job to another. And the region had negative productivity growth. In other words, the jobs that were created in low productivity sectors. I don't know, perhaps it's a part of the region is construction, it's just services, and it is all these labor-intensive cases that we have. Now, don't they have skills? We don't have skills. Look how much the firms train in the MENA. They are the ones that train least. If they didn't have skills, they will train. So what they say, we don't have skills. Yes, of course we don't have skills. Nowhere you have skills ready-made. Are you prepared to train? Are you prepared to pay? The answer is no. So the economy is not constrained by the youth in education and skills. It's constrained by the economy. But this rentier model, clubby privatization, where you have too many rich and too few poor. Then I have a lot on human development here. And what's happening is that there was no social protection and human development in the region was declining fast compared to other regions. And in a globalizing world, what matters is how fast you move relative to others. Not that your education is increasing, but how fast it increases relatively to East Asia, for example. Now, just on the getting to the Arab Spring, one thing that is very characteristic of the region by 2010 is the low accountability of governments. There was a big gap there. Governments were doing whatever they want to do, and they were expecting the reforms to deliver, which they did not. Voice and accountability was declining over time. And there were protests, and as you can see, this is protests in North Africa in 1996 to 2000. They were suppressed. They came back higher, they were suppressed. They came back even higher, and eventually they explode in 2010. So if there is no channels for voice, you get the street. Youth unemployment, 24% in the region, it's a joke. In Greece it is 63%. In Spain it's 55%. You don't have the kind of changes that we had here. The pessimism of the Arab region was increasing in 2000, despite the good indicators that the economists had. It was the only region when pessimism was increasing. These are people who were asking in 2006, what do you think it will be in 2010? In all the regions they were optimistic, except the Arab region. And this is the last slide I want to show you, which is IMF and World Bank data. Here what I plotted is voice and accountability. In my work, I never refer to trade unions or democracy, whatever. You can have good labor relations without trade unions, or you can have a listening government without having whatever model you want. But it's an index of voice and accountability on the right hand. On top, I have how fast were your income increases. Forget inequality, poverty, and other things. For most people, 90% who are employed, the incomes increase over time. You want to be there. You have very high income and accountability. This is the country you want to be. Or you want to be China or India. Okay, you don't have too much voice, but at least these countries, up until this year, they were growing very fast. You even want to be Sweden, Finland, Luxembourg, Switzerland, Norway, Denmark. They don't have very high growth there. They had it in the past. These are very rich countries. So once you are very rich, you want voice and accountability. Now look, you don't want to be there, in that quadrant. And who is there? All the Arab countries, they are red. There is no single Arab country which is one of higher growth or voice and accountability, and surely that it is at the very top. And look who is on the very left. It is Tunisia, Egypt, Libya, Yemen, Syria. So, coming back to the Arab Spring, what were people expecting to see? It was to have economic growth and income growth, and to have some way of expressing their concerns. So, at the end of the day, coming back to where we started, an important thing is to bear in mind is we have a very complex relationship between production and reproduction and the political environment. And if you want things to stay the same, you have to change everything. Thank you.